Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, whatever time you're watching this. I'm Bill Dixon, the president of North Carolina Vietnam Veterans, and my co-host Bob Matthews and I tonight got a very special guest with us. We're looking forward to visiting. This is the North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Lessons of Vietnam show. Glad you're with us. And tonight, you may remember some time ago we had Bill Tschudy, who was a POW at the powerhouse, I believe, the power plant in Hanoi. And let's see, I believe, Bill, you were with Jeremiah Denton? You were in the same airplane, okay. So recently we just lost Jeremiah Denton a week or two ago. But what we have tonight is a very special guest, a very strong lady, is Janie Tschudy. I was married 3 years when I went to Vietnam, and I know that how hard it was for my wife, and I was not doing anything near what Bill was doing, and she knew where I was all the time. Unlike Janie, she always didn't know where Bill was. And how long y'all had been married, Janie, when he went to Vietnam this time?
3 years.
3 years. Well, that was
3 years.
about 3 years that I had been married with
That's
someone.
right.
Yeah. Where were you all living at the time?
In Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach.
In Virginia.
All right. And let's see. I believe he was Navy.
Yes.
Okay.
He was Navy.
That's Virginia Beach. Where were y'all from originally?
Well, I was born in Texas, but lived in the Midwest by most of my formative years in Michigan and Ohio. And Bill was from Illinois, but we met in Texas.
Oh, okay. We're in Texas.
In Dallas.
In Dallas, okay.
That's right. And Texas Instruments. We both worked there.
Okay. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that's where when I came back from Vietnam, they sent me to Texas, and I really enjoyed living in Texas for the brief time I was there.
Yes, nice state, big state.
Yes, couldn't quite get used to the weather there either. It's kind of
pretty hot, but it was dry. It wasn't the humidity.
Well, you know, I was a little disappointed because I'd always grew up watching all the cowboy movies and always saw the deserts with those big cactus. And where I lived in Texas, around Fort Hood, they cut the tops off all the mountain. And they call them plateaus or something.
That's right.
And never did see any of those big, tall cactuses.
That's
so
right.
I figured that was...
You have to go to Arizona.
Okay. But I really enjoyed it. So you were married 3 years. I believe you had just had a son.
A son. He was 5 months when Bill left in May of 1965.
And you were still in Virginia at the time.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes.
Okay. He was already how long had he been in the military when you when he left? I mean.
Well, he had some Marine time after he graduated from college. He did the 6-month stint and then weekends. So he probably had 3 years of that. And then the Navy, he had been commissioned for 3 years, 3 to 4 years.
So you had already been had some military life before he left. So.
Yes, we were in a squadron and, had activities with other wives and then husbands and wives. So I was getting used to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Did he go over with a group or?
With a squadron.
With a squadron. Okay.
That's right. VA 75, and they went aboard the U.S. Independence along with other squadrons. And it was the first A6 squadron that went to Vietnam. They were very anxious to get that airplane over there.
And how long was Bill gone before you got word that he was missing or shot down? Or?
He left in May, early May, and I got the word on July 18th. So whatever that is.
Now, how did they tell you? I mean, did they say, Miss Tschudy, your husband is missing, or he was shot down, or just?
Well, it was sort of unusual. I was up in northern Michigan. I had taken Michael, and we drove to Ohio and then went on up to northern Michigan. And so I was, in fact, gone. I was out that day with Michael and another little niece. And when I came in, my folks told me, because they got the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was just missing. We didn't know anything. And it was an awkward situation because I was probably 50 miles from the nearest military facility. And so I decided pretty quickly that I would go back to Virginia Beach and be closer to maybe getting information.
Well, I imagine in those situations, anything would have been awkward, but especially. Did they keep in touch with you and keep you informed of what was going on, or?
Well, yeah, there was a man that came over from the Navy facility. He didn't really have much to say, but he came and, offered any help. But there was an indication at that point that maybe they both made it out of the plane. And it was getting more hopeful. And then, in fact, the day that I left Michigan, my sister's father-in-law, who was a stockbroker, saw it come across the ticker tape that 2 airmen were captured, and it gave the airplane, the A-6A Intruder, and I believe might have even given names, but at least we knew pretty sure that it was both Bill and Jerry.
So at least you had something that...
That's right.
Yeah.
But then we found they released a picture about 5 days later of both of them. So we had that confirmation. Yes, yes.
Well, did the other wives step forward and give you support, or they kind of go, "Well, I'm glad it's you and not me"?
Well, yeah, we were the first ones.
Mm-hmm.
Jane and I were, Jane Denton, and so we sort of paved the way. But the squadron wives were very helpful and very concerned. But yeah, I mean that scared them too. Because then you realized it could happen.
Yes, it's...
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Navy gave you support. And now, were you able to stay there on a base, or did you?
We owned a home.
Oh, you owned a home. Okay.
Yes, we had purchased a home a year ago, or a year before he was shot down. So that was even more reason to stay there. I never really considered going back home.
Yeah. Did the Navy kind of give you updates or tell you there's nothing new, or?
Periodically, we would go up to Washington. Jane and I would go up and go to the Bureau of Navy Personnel, talk to them, go to the State Department, do the rounds. Of course, there was really nothing.
Yeah, that was fairly early on, so there wasn't a whole... It was kind of like they probably didn't know exactly what to do with the wives and so forth. And,
that's right. We were a dilemma.
Yes.
Well, but even though they had certainly had this situation in Korea, and I think they improved upon a lot of their ways of handling the families from Korea.
Yeah. Well, I know in the famous scene in We Were Soldiers Once and Young, where the cab driver delivered the messages, and I understand from the true story that the cab driver got drunk and fell off the porch the first time he went, and that's when the wife of the commander took over, and so.
Okay.
Because it was upsetting the cab driver so much, he just got drunk because he just
couldn't face it.
Couldn't face it. And I imagine that has got to be a tough job to go tell a spouse that we don't know what's happened to your husband.
That's right.
We just know that.
That's right.
Did you always feel like it was going to work out, or?
Well, there were times that, let's say, maybe some of the other wives received a piece of mail, and I might not have. And I think I went a year and a half without hearing anything. And then, yes, you get very concerned that there could be illness of some sort. I really didn't feel that the North Vietnamese would have injured or done anything purposely because they were money in the bank for the North Vietnamese for trade. But yes, you would. It was worrisome.
Well, Jeremiah Denton is known for his Morse code blinking
That's right.
torture. And what did you feel when you saw that? I mean, how?
Well, at first I thought, good Lord, what's wrong with him? With the blinking, and didn't know anything really for a while. But in fact, I'm not sure I even knew that that's what happened because they didn't want to publicize that.
Yes.
That would have gone very hard for him if they had known that. But when that happened, I think they felt that they had something to go on as far as condemning the North Vietnamese.
I know that the wives of all the POWs kind of came together.
Yes, yes, we did.
Well, was that the beginning of the League of Families, or?
Well, that organized probably about 4 to 5 years after Bill and Jerry were shot down. We were told in the beginning not to talk because they were fearful of us, what could happen with us to some degree, but that it would go hard on the men. That, but when we found out and we knew there was torture, then we had something to go on and could complain and let it be known that these men weren't being treated right.
Well, today we have the Westboro Baptist Church group that protest at funerals and so forth, and have actually been known to call up people and say, we're glad that your son or whatever was killed. Did you have to endure people who are kind of...
No, fortunately.
You've been around the military, I would think you're pretty much...
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, there would be times if we would do, let's say, a television show of some sort that people in the audience might say, well, how is this country, U.S., treating the Vietnamese prisoners? And that was certainly a fair concern. And the International Red Cross was allowed into South Vietnam, where some of the men were South Vietnamese prisoners were held, but never was the Red Cross allowed in the North.
Now, tell me some of the shows and so forth that you went on to talk about the situation. I think we had just talked about you had gone on Phil Donahue's show before he became
right.
the big Phil Donahue.
That's right. Did the Phil Donahue show twice, and that was probably in about 1968. And then did a show, Merv Griffin. That's
yes.
it. Show with Ross Perot. And then did a Phil Donahue with Ross Perot. So I ended up doing 3 Phil Donahue shows. But
so you became a celebrity on your own.
Oh, that's right.
Well, there's so many wives whose husbands were in Vietnam just a short time.
Yes.
Who did not stick with them, and that in itself is phenomenal that y'all have still been together, and
right.
It takes a very strong wife to hang in there and believe and trust and so forth. Because I would think that's one of the things that kept Bill and the other men going was back home and
yes,
getting back home and family and so forth. And you were being taken care of by the Navy and so forth.
That's right. Yes, I continued to get Sal his pay, but a certain amount certainly was held out for him, because during the Korean War, men came back having been prisoner, and they had not kept any money back, and it was all gone. The wife had spent it, and the man came back to nothing.
Did you keep up on the news and so forth? What was going on in
Yes.
Vietnam, pretty
Yes.
much? In '68, we had the Tet Offensive,
Mm-hmm.
which was supposedly the big uprising, and things changed quite a bit. Do you have any feelings about what was going on during the Tet Offensive, as far as where Bill was and what was going on, or?
Well, I've kind of forgotten. You have to bring me up to date on what exactly.
Well, that was '68 Tet Offensive when the Vietnamese attacked all the major cities, Saigon, the embassy, Hue, and took over Hue
Okay.
for a while. And it was supposed to be when all the South Vietnamese people rose up and fought with the North Vietnamese and took over and run the Americans out. As it worked out, the South Vietnamese did not do that. But that's where Walter Cronkite kind of changed his thought patterns, because he was pretty much supporting the soldier in the war. But after the Tet Offensive, he came out totally against the war and so forth, and it changed. It's like we've always, us who were there during that time, we won the battle and lost the war.
Yeah.
During the Tet Offensive, and
Right.
when Walter, it's like Johnson said, when he lost Cronkite, he lost the nation.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely right. And I don't remember being particularly discouraged at that time any more so than others. I think probably one of the hardest times is when the bombing stopped,
Mm-hmm.
because then it became such a political war. Johnson stopped the bombing, and I still believe to this day it was because of politics.
The whole war was politics. It's been said that actually Nixon talked to the Chinese and told them to tell the North Vietnamese to not negotiate until he got in the office, because he'd give them a better deal.
Oh,
And so you
well, who knows? That could have sure have happened.
yeah, but because he had his own things going. But when did you know Bill was one of the returnees? I mean, they were bringing returnees home, but a lot of people didn't know who was coming and when. And
Well, we knew, and I had what you call a casualty officer, and who happened to be a good friend. He and his wife were very good friends of ours, and his name was Bill, and he said, when I know Bill will be on the first airplane, I'll come over with a bottle of champagne. And sure enough, the doorbell rang, and there were Bill and Ann, and with the bottle of champagne. So I knew he'd be on the first. They released them the way they were shot down in that order. So that was the only fair thing they ever did.
I know a lot of people didn't know who was going to be on the plane, or if they were even had their loved one was even coming home. So because the list was not always the best.
Well, as it turned out, when Bill came off the airplane, his name was never given. So that was frightening.
Because they didn't know how to pronounce it.
That's right. So, that's what we think happened.
Yeah.
And that was disturbing, because I thought I saw him, but then, after 8 years, you think, well, now do I remember right?
And he probably hadn't gained a whole lot of weight in that.
No. He was, I think, 140-some pounds at that point.
Yeah. So when did you actually get a chance to speak to him? I mean, they came off the plane, they did all the speeches and so forth, and I imagine everybody out there was when, please hurry up.
Yep, they were in the Philippines, and each man was pretty much given free rein to the telephone.
Mm-hmm.
So he called, I can't remember what time, but it was early in the morning, our time, and we talked for probably an hour, maybe longer.
Mm-hmm.
Michael talked to his father for the first time. And
that had been very special for both of you.
Oh, yes. And then the funny thing was, the next time Bill called, Michael answered the phone, and he said, "Oh, hi, Dad." Just like, you've been calling all these years.
Went out to work or something.
Right.
And, So when that from the Philippines, you got a chance to see him? Did you get the chance to go to the Philippines? Did you have to wait till you came?
No, everybody, they decided, the services decided that would be too crazy to try to get families over there. Better that they get debriefed and
Medical
a
treatment.
physical checkup right away. And then it was, some men came back to the States from the Philippines in 2 days. And Bill was, I think, about 5 days before he got back.
Yeah.
So that, it did give us some time to kind of get calmed down a bit. And
Well, again, they were probably trying to get him back, but they couldn't figure out how to pronounce his name,
That's
to call his
right.
name to get him on the airplane.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. The here you are. You've been 7.5 years, right at 8 years, running the house, being a single mom,
That's right.
being in charge of everything.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, this guy comes back. He's been on this vacation for the last 7, 8 years.
I know.
It's-
He had it easy.
Yeah, just how did you? It had to be a little bit hard to kind of loosen the reins a
Well,
little bit, and
He didn't try to take it all back. I still wrote the checks. And, I mean, anything that would go wrong with it. Well, by that time, I had sold the home that we originally owned and had been in an apartment and had also then had a house built. So he came back to a house he didn't know at all. But, no, that area was not difficult for
Good,
us at
good.
all. The letting go of responsibility or continuing.
I imagine life
as
was
I
very
had.
busy too.
Oh,
Coming
yes.
back and him having to go back and forth, probably be interviewed again, and
Right. It was well, gosh, we were on the go almost constantly for the first few months.
and he stayed in the military.
Yes. Because at that point he had, I guess probably 11 years in at that juncture. And so he decided definitely to stay in. The Navy was very willing to try to give them any assignment they wanted, and Bill decided that he would go to graduate school, and he ended up being sent to Wharton paid for by the Navy, and so we moved right away. In that, actually, Bill went up to Pennsylvania and had to do some coursework before the semester started.
What would you have thought if he gotten orders for Vietnam again?
Oh, well, I think he was crazy. I think if he'd offered to go back.
Well, he didn't get to see it the first time.
No, that's true. Join the Navy, see the world.
See the world, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, if you want to call in and ask Janie questions or make comments or whatever, it's 919-518-9773. Don't sit there and listen to all the stories and so forth. Call in, join us, be part of the show. Again, it's 919-518-9773. Call in, ask your questions, make comments, whatever. So you're going ahead and you where did you go to the graduate school?
Wharton. At the University of Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so then did y'all move there? Or?
We moved up to Pennsylvania, lived in Paoli, and he took the train in every day to school, and then I ended up finding out we were going to have a baby, and Nancy Ann was born on July 4th, 1974. She was our freedom baby. And so a lot happened.
Yes.
A lot happened.
I imagine there was a lot of adjustment for Michael and Bill to get to know each other and.
Well, it's funny. I think probably the one thing that Michael might have had the toughest time adjusting to through his growing up years was always feeling he never could be as strong or as accomplished as his father having gone through what Bill went through. And I'm sorry for that, but as he's gotten older, he'll be 50. That's okay.
Yeah.
He sees he's done well, so that's all right.
Yeah.
But there were, I think, some families had some real difficult times.
Yeah.
With one child, it wasn't as difficult.
Of course, he had a real strong lady back there supporting him, helping him get through all that, and that's that's, to me, that is one of the amazing part of the story. That 7.5 years, staying there, keeping the family together, running things, and having that faith that he was going to come home. That's very special.
Well, that one thing, the other wives, POW or MIA wives, we all tried hard to help one another.
Mm-hmm.
It got to the point that being a part of the squadron was difficult, just because, their life had gone on. The men had come home, and of course, we lost a couple men; they were killed.
Mm-hmm.
So to play bridge with the squadron wives just didn't quite feel as comfortable as it had in the, when everything was normal.
Well, I'm gonna turn that over and let Bob talk with you, Bob Matthews, a little bit. He's going to ask you some deep, in-depth questions and so forth, because that's what he does. They keep me around for the easy questions and so forth. But before we do that, we talked a little bit about the League of Families a little bit,
Yes.
and we're going to look at some information about the League of Families. They're still active today.
Yes.
I know JPAC has had its challenges lately with remains and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, our next show will be from Dong Ha, Vietnam. We're leaving about 2 weeks from now for Dong Ha, Vietnam. And when we come back, our guest then will be, again, Gary Turner. Gary Turner is the cousin of Joseph Hargrove. One of the Marines was left on islands of Tonga after the Mayaguez, I told you I have a hard time pronouncing that word, incident, and things have really kind of moved along since he was on the show last, where the JPAC had said they were not going back, and all of a sudden now they've announced that they are going back to the island to look for Joseph and other remains. So he's going to be coming back, talking a little bit about his book and updating us a little bit. And Mr. Producer, when you...
Ready?
Yeah.
Good evening and welcome back to the show, Lessons of Vietnam, show 17. I'd like to thank Bill Dixon for a great first half of the show, and of course, I'd like to welcome Janie Tschudy
Yes. Hi.
from all the Vietnam veterans and all the students in Wake County schools and really around the country, Janie, where we've been teaching the Vietnam course. This has been the one subject, as I told your husband Bill when he was on the show, that we tried to breach the subject of the POW issue, and we tried to give them some insights, because as you well know, myself and all the veterans that helped me teach the class are all Vietnam veterans, but none are POWs.
Yeah.
And that's, as many times as you talk to veterans and you talk to people and you teach school as long as I did, people always say, I know what you mean. They kind of compare things and analogies and all that. Well, when we were training to teach this course to the teachers around the country, I used to tell the teachers, this is one time you can't say that. When someone comes in, you can't say, I know what you mean, because you do not.
That's right.
And years ago, I'm not sure if you were home that time, when I stumbled across the article in the Western Wake Herald about finding Bill's helmet in Moscow,
Oh, yes.
and I saw it, and I said, wow. And I was sitting at home. I live in Cary. I was sitting at home. I said to Betty, my wife, I'm going to call Bill Tschudy. And I was uneasy about it. And Betty said, maybe we ought to respect his privacy. Maybe there's some things he doesn't want to bring up. And there was. And at first I said, well, maybe I went out of bounds. I should get a flag thrown on me for this. Leave this man alone. He's been through enough. Well, obviously the last few years, I have come to treasure Bill's friendship. And you, just meeting you at our thing the other night in Cary, you also have made a big difference with us. Because now, Janie, we can answer all the questions.
Good.
I know.
Good.
I mean, not all of them, of
There are
course.
no surprises.
Oh, I
anymore.
don't know about that. But when Bill Dixon was talking to you in the first half of the show, and he was talking about waiting, the title of tonight's show was Those Who Waited. And when I was in Vietnam, I was married, and I had two brothers, a sister, two parents, and all this. And this was a rippling effect throughout the nation. People waiting, watching the news, unsure of what was what. And you were in a worse dilemma than any of us. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with me, if you can put this in a jar, if you can, what was the hardest part about waiting? Was it the unknown factor, or was...
Well, yes, always that. And thinking, well, maybe by next Christmas they'll be home. And then you stop doing that, because it isn't that you gave up hope. It's just that wasn't a comfortable way, I guess, to live.
Sure.
We always had hope.
Of course.
And
of course.
And I think as we became more secure that the North Vietnamese were not going to kill these men, they wanted them.
Oh, yes, like you
now.
said earlier.
But of course, you never knew about disease or sickness, or maybe a torture session was too hard, that sort of thing. I guess we didn't know, and we didn't know the extent of the torture before they came home.
Well, the one thing I used to mention to all the kids in the different class that we taught in Vietnam was that the Vietnam veteran, no matter how hard they had it or easy they had it, they had it. It was in front of them.
Right.
The people at home, it was here in their imagination.
Yes.
It might have been twice as bad.
Yeah.
Imagining what could be happening, what wasn't happening. So my next question to you, Janie, would be, how did you bring Mike along with this? You and Mike, when Mike was growing up.
Right.
Because when Bill came home, wasn't Mike 7 years old?
He was 8 years old
8 years
when
old.
he came home.
So they're very formative years, as you well know.
That's right.
How did you bring Mike along with this on a...
Well, of course, the first couple years, he was still very young.
Sure.
When I would get a letter, he would hear it. I would read it to him, show it to him. Talk about anything that he needed to talk about. I always, I assured him that, his father was a prisoner.
Sure.
And, but a lot of the period, I didn't know what even that meant as far as treatment went.
Sure.
And I wouldn't have told him that anyway.
Right.
Just keeping him abreast. And one of his friends said, well, your father is killed. He's not a prisoner.
A friend said that.
Well, yeah, you know
Wow.
how little kids
Oh,
can
yes,
be.
of course,
you
of
know.
course.
And I said, no, Michael, no, that's not true. And he shouldn't have said that, but it's not true. And I would tell you if
course.
that had happened.
And you two became tight, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Michael's 50, isn't he?
He will be 50 in December. How can he do that?
I
to
don't
us?
know because it's not fair, is it?
Oh,
I
my
love
gosh.
it. Now,
Yes.
Michael and Nancy Ann, I
Uh-huh.
believe Bill told me, live on the West Coast,
Yes.
San Francisco.
Yes. They're both in the Bay Area.
Uh-huh.
That's right. And they love it out there. They've pretty much told me, stop trying to get us
We're not,
back east.
we're not coming east.
We're not coming east. And
Well,
I said, okay.
Well, I'm sure as Michael got older that he knew his dad was a tough guy. He went through Paris Island.
Yes. Yes.
He survived the Hanoi Hilton, came back stronger than ever. And as I talked before to Bill Tschudy, he's coming to many of our classes, and the kids would talk to me afterwards. I used to use the thing called transference. I'd say, why don't you let me be Bill Tschudy or Janie Tschudy, and you ask me questions because you know me,
Right.
and you don't know them. And when they come in, I don't want you to be embarrassed or intimidated.
Sure.
And so they did. And they started asking questions like this. Will you ask Bill this? And I said, I'm Bill.
Okay.
And so we started this dialogue back and forth. And they came to the conclusion after Bill had left the class and we talked about the issue of the POWs, a conclusion I knew they would come to, that these guys are tough as nails. And you know that. You know
Yeah.
that. Tough as
Well,
nails.
that's right. And I think probably the most beautiful part of that whole story is how did these men survive was they each helped one another.
Yes.
And through talking through the walls and any way they could.
Anyway, the tap
Yeah.
code, everything.
That's right. So,
It-
and their faith. Some made it on faith, some
Sure.
didn't have faith, but they helped one another.
Sure. And as Bill Dixon mentioned on the first part of the show, he said that you mentioned that you bonded quite a bit with Mrs. Denton,
Oh, yes.
and you had met Ross Perot and all this.
Right.
My question to you is, how important in this time period in history, how important in your opinion was Ross Perot?
Oh, very, very important. He focused this, actually the world, on the situation with the prisoners. And he had a huge writing campaign. He flew Christmas packages.
Yes, he did. I remember that. Yes.
They never made it.
I know.
And he really pretty much surmised they wouldn't. But the publicity of trying to get those packages held the world's attention, and it made people aware how long some of these men had been there.
Well, you know, knowledge is a dangerous thing. A little bit of knowledge, and for a long time, I think Bill mentioned earlier on the first half of the show, for a long time people didn't want to hear things. They didn't want to know a little bit of news. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned, Walter Cronkite, the news is they wanted Vietnam to be over with and
Right.
an answer. There were no answers
No.
to some of the questions. You had to keep asking questions, and fairly soon people got tired of it.
Mm-hmm.
So did you run into anyone while Bill was gone that basically didn't want to hear it?
No. There would be people who would cut you short.
Okay.
And that would be done by, well, at least you know he's alive.
Sure.
Okay. And I think probably that's something that a person who's going through it can say, but not somebody who is on the other end of it.
Exactly.
I've learned I learned a valuable lesson then, that you don't tell people who are hurting how they should look at something.
Excellent point.
Yeah, you let them, they'll come to that conclusion themselves. But I knew plenty of wives whose husbands were killed.
Sure.
And you just let them talk.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That's
Janie,
right.
I guess when something like this happens in your life, it's so traumatic that you really know who your friends are.
Oh, yes.
I mean, your friends
That's
show
right.
their true colors,
Yep.
and they're real friends. And still to
That's
this
right.
day, I'm sure they're friends.
Oh, yes. And the list gets narrower, but that's okay. The
That's
older
okay.
you get, you just want those really
Very good.
friends. You can have a lot of acquaintances, but
That's right.
I've got several really good friends. I miss Jane very much.
That's my next question I was going to ask. I know you were very close with the Dentons,
Yes.
and you worked together a lot. And he was very famous, as Bill is, being on the cover of Time magazine
Oh, yes.
and things like this, because something like this comes along, and I really appreciate your willingness to share this with us and share it with the students. And we take this back, and I write everything down. And when I go back to my classes and teach, we talk about this. We talk about you and Bill and how you are true American heroes going through this. And a lot of us served in Vietnam, of course. And we've had a tough time dealing with it for years. But education is the key. We tell the students all the time. And when I remember this funny story, when Bill came to Athens Drive to speak a couple of years ago, he calls me on the phone. We're talking. He goes, "How about this, Bob? How about we come into the classes, 90-minute block schedules?"
Oh,
90 minutes. I said, "Yes, Bill, that'd be great." He goes, "You will come in and you introduce me, and then we'll both take questions for 90 minutes."
yeah.
That's great. Well, I come in to Jim Baum's class, Athens Drive, and I said, "Good morning." I said, "Mr. Matt, this is Mr. Bill Tschudy, the man I've been telling you about." And Bill says, "Thank you, Bob." Last word I said all day.
That's right.
Bill talked the whole 90 minutes.
Oh.
I didn't get one question. I'm like this.
I
Thank you.
know.
Thank you, Bill. That was great.
Yes.
Because they didn't want to hear me anyway.
That's right.
They wanted to hear Bill Tschudy, not me. They hear
Well,
Bob
I'm going
Matthews all
to
the
be
time.
doing something with him in about a month, and I just hope he doesn't hog the whole time.
Well, I was reading some bios about different people that have gone around the country, and it seems like the last 2 years, there's quite a bit of interest in all aspects of Vietnam. The 50th year anniversary is coming up and all this, but for a long time, Janie, Vietnam as an issue was almost taboo. You talked about it, and like you said, people cut you off. Enough, let's move on. What's for dinner? What's for lunch?
Right.
And when you started getting into classroom, you started doing critical thinking. Why this happened? Why the politics got involved? Why the Paris peace talks? Why all this stuff? Pretty soon, you had a course you could not stop teaching.
Yeah.
And I was telling Bill and some of the other veterans that we started this course in Raleigh with one school. And last month, Bill Dixon and I christened our 1,000th school we talked to.
Yes, isn't
Nationwide.
it all over the country?
All over the country.
That's
And
wonderful.
we even teach the lessons of Vietnam in Vietnam.
Oh, that is something else.
But I
What
wanted to ask you if you would mind for a few moments if I would do a little word association,
All right.
because a lot of times when people study history, whether it's World War II or Korea or Vietnam, they hang on phrases like Pearl Harbor, and for this generation, years from now, it's going to be 9/11,
Yeah.
all this kind of thing. We had Tet, as Bill mentioned before. So I'd like to start with Richard Nixon.
All right. You want to know?
What do you
What-
think of Nixon? Yeah.
Okay. I felt after the bombing halt by Johnson, I was glad to have Richard Nixon. But of course, the bombing halt still continued, and I guess it started up again in December before they were released. But I was comfortable with him.
Good.
Yeah.
'Cause weren't you a guest at the dinner at the White House?
Yes.
The
Yes.
DOW dinner that
Yes.
Richard Nixon held? I think to this date, Janie, that may be the largest dinner the White House ever
It
held.
was. It
And-
was
and
the
still is.
largest. They had to bring in a tent and put it. It was the largest dinner.
These guys need a big room, don't they?
No, I have great respect for him.
You know, I think as history goes on, and I'm not saying Watergate will ever blur
know.
out. It's there, but Richard Nixon seems to be more appreciated by historians for things he did and tried to do,
Yes.
things like this. Now, you already talked about Ross Perot. Now, do you have any comments to make on Lyndon Johnson?
I think he did us a great disservice by stopping the bombing. What good did that do? It just prolonged everything.
It did.
It really did. And if you're going to do it and do it right. But that was all politics.
Well, you know, that's a good indication of kind of what happened to Lyndon at the end of his political career when he chose not to run.
Yes.
And he would have won again, probably. But he chose not to run, and he blamed Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's true or not, but when he chose not to run, and then, of course, Nixon came in later and all this. But what do you have any impressions of a man named John McCain?
Oh, he's a fine man.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. He's a fine man. And, no, I think served his country very, very well in Vietnam. And could have been released early,
Yes.
but chose
Yes.
not to.
That was very heroic.
Yeah. I think he's a good person.
Well, I call these flashpoints in the classroom, and I had a chance last year to teach a course at NC State to adults, the Encore program on lessons of Vietnam, and these men and women came in, and they were in their 50s and 60s, and they were right in that bracket of time that missed Vietnam.
Yes. That's
They
right.
lived through it, but didn't serve, but certainly were affected by it. So I started with flashpoints like this, and I said, I'll bring up a name, like or a event or a place. Then we'll all talk about what it meant to you at that time in your life.
Right.
Like I brought up Kent State, and ironically, a guy in the classroom was a student at Kent the day of the mess,
Sure.
and so he gave all his insight. Everybody, it became such a good class. It was almost like making a meal. Everybody had a dish.
Yeah.
They're serving all this. Everybody's talking like this. And, I mean, when the bell rang, nobody moved. They wanted to stay. We kept talking and talking and talking. And so then they said, when are we going to get to the controversial stuff? And I said, anytime you want to. So one guy said, how about My Lai? And I said, well, you have to talk about My Lai. If you open Vietnam, if you open the can of worms, leave the lid off of it.
Right.
Talk about everything.
Yeah.
Talk about Agent Orange. Talk about the POWs. Talk about My Lai. And I have another person to ask you about, and this is a question that I get every time I start a class, because the teachers brief the students on how to ask good questions.
Okay.
And one guy in the back will always go like this, Mr. Matthews, my dad had a question. I say, what? What do you think of Jane Fonda?
Oh.
And right away, I'll have Bill Dixon with me or one of the veterans,
Right.
and everybody will look at each other and roll their eyes. They'll go, here goes Bob again.
Oh, yeah.
And so I keep in my wallet a Handle Jane sticker,
Okay.
because she's my girl.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, right. Don't ask me.
I'm going to. That was your next flashpoint, Jane
Yeah.
Fonda.
Oh, well, you know, it was the typical movie star who thought she had the answers and got a lot of publicity by being anti-war. And just as they are today with whatever it is they think they have to be against. And I just wondered how stardom made her so knowledgeable.
I understand.
You know, isn't that, it's really something.
It is, because I've seen some interviews, and believe me, she's not going to medical
No.
school.
No, in fact, the whole, frankly, the anti-war movement was another thing that prolonged
Yes.
Vietnam.
Yes, it did.
And the North Vietnamese believed that they could win the battle on the streets of USA.
Yeah.
And they told the prisoners
It
this.
is. Propaganda.
Right, sure.
The next thing I was going to talk about with you was being home as long as you were, waiting for Bill and working with the League of Families. What was your impression of the media coverage of the war?
not nearly as one-sided, I think, as it is today, the national media. CBS was certainly anti-war.
Yes.
Something very interesting, though. There were 3 of us that went to New York, sponsored by Ross Perot, and he asked each one of us. We went into all the major networks.
I see.
We went to all the major magazines and asked them, would you please help us get the information out to this country, what's really going on with the prisoners? Everyone responded.
Wow.
So, I can't be too anti-media.
No, of course not.
At that time. I think it's just gone downhill.
Well, Walter Cronkite left.
That's right. That's right. But
You know,
they
you-
helped us. They did.
Sure. Well, it seems like talking with you, and getting to know you and Bill, you came past a horrific time in your life. You raised Mike, you had another child, you have a wonderful family, and things like this. Did you ever get mad at Bill?
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, for being gone.
Oh.
Well, I'm mad at him anyway. No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
I didn't get mad at him for being gone because he had no choice there. Okay. I've been mad at him when time to time.
Of course.
He's got a lot of German blood in him.
Bill did?
And no, not then. Not he couldn't help that.
When Bill Dixon was saying early in the show about how when Bill came home and you had run the show
Uh-huh.
for 7.5, 8 years, and it was time to maybe share and so forth like this and back and forth. And was there any time there was something that you really wanted to ask Bill about his captivity? It was like walking on eggshells. You kind of avoided some things? Because I have.
Okay. No, I didn't because he came off the airplane talking.
Okay. Very good.
And, he let me know what happened.
Good.
And I never did ever feel that there was something I couldn't ask.
It's wonderful.
He's very open about it. And you just ask him anything you want.
Well, I tried to, but I couldn't. He took all the time in the classroom.
I know.
I tried
I
to.
know.
Well, as we get to close to the end of the show tonight, what I was talking to Bill about before when I first met Bill was that the lessons of Vietnam, maybe one of the lessons of Vietnam, there's many of course, was that if we do have American men or women in captivity, let's turn over every stone,
Right.
look under every rock. So
That's
Janie,
right.
my last question to you tonight is, do you think, after all your experience with this, are there any live POWs in Vietnam?
No, I don't think there are. And that's really based more on, I think, what the men from the North came out feeling they knew everyone that was there. And
Sure,
they knew
sure.
if one had died. Now, that's not to say in South Vietnam or Laos that there could have been somebody. I'm not qualified
I understand.
for that area, but I think in the North, everyone was released.
Yeah, I can't imagine. We have a couple minutes to talk about this. I can't imagine what it was like when you were notified about Operation Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
Could you share that with us, please?
Oh, yes. They had the military had planned this for years. It was a very ongoing plan, but it was very exciting. And I mean, I guess that's one thing in life you really can't top it. How would you top that?
That's a great
And,
question.
I mean,
how would you top
yeah.
that?
And there's one thing I want to say now. This is off that subject, but I think both Bill and I have felt very, very bad for so many veterans who were in Vietnam and the way they were not welcomed home. The prisoners, the arms were open.
Sure. As they should have been.
But there were so many men who were so damaged and so hurt by that war. And then this country didn't respond in a loving way. And that to me is a heartache.
It is.
A terrible heartache.
And Janie, it was probably the driving force behind the reason we started this course.
Yeah.
Because there's 58,000 men and women on the wall in D.C. No one's telling their stories.
No.
And we started to write this course on it, and that's one of the reasons was not just the way they were treated, but there was so much ignorance about the war
Yes.
and so much apathy. And we said we have to get something like this into the high schools, start the dialogue,
That's right.
mind the veteran community, bring these assets into the classroom.
Right.
Talk to the kids, talk to the parents, explain why you went 12,000 miles to fight for freedom.
Right.
Because people fought for our freedom.
Sure.
And if we were called upon, we'd probably all do it again.
That's right. It doesn't matter how you felt about the war. These men were called to go. And then to turn spit on them and just treat some of them so terribly.
There was a slogan that came out a few years ago, and it was one I liked a lot. It said, with all the knowledge in America, you have the right to be against the war, but not against the warriors.
Yes. Well put.
And I think it's something that we have to cling to
That's right.
and allow people to speak their minds. And Janie, I cannot thank you enough for
Well,
tonight. It's been a
thank
pleasure to
you.
meet you the other night and to meet you again.
Yes.
I have one last question.
Yes.
Do you think, as we get all this education stuff going in Wake County next year, you would like to speak to a class?
I could certainly consider it.
Well, I'd like you to consider it.
Okay.
Because all the guys and girls in Wake County, they hear a lot of the men come in.
Right.
We brought in some wives of regular Vietnam veterans. It was a great, but no one's ever come in that's been the wife of a POW.
Okay.
I'd like you to think about it.
All right. I will. I certainly will.
Thank you
and
again.
I would be happy to do it for you.
Thank you, Janie. Well, that will conclude tonight's show. I'd like to thank you for watching. And as Bill Dixon said, bon voyage. We're off to Vietnam 2 weeks from tonight. Thank you again, everybody. Have a nice evening.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, and if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals. That VidBlasterGuy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.